as a young person, how did you ever get involved in being interested in the kind of work you ended up doing?
Well, I was born and raised in Biloxi, Mississippi on the Gulf Coast, around the Gulf, about a quarter of the way from here in Crystal River. And that was at a time when manatees were unknown there, or even unknown to most people in Florida back in those days, but they hadn't yet expanded their summertime range over to the Mississippi coast, and so nobody ever heard of them there, nor had I guess. And it was also not a great place for collecting fossils. In fact, I had to come to Florida to start actually picking up fossil bones on my own. So it was through reading, and I was interested in the fossil side of it before I got into modern marine mammals at all. Interested in dinosaurs when I was little, and then by the time I was in high school, I'd gotten a hold of a standard textbook by Alfred Romer on vertebrate paleontology, and leafing through there, I noticed he had a picture of a skeleton of an extinct sea cow, Halidarium, and I was struck by that image, a very strange looking animal with no hind limbs or anything like that, and I was intrigued by it, and started reading what little I could get a hold of about that particular group of animals, and then found pieces of them coming over here to Florida on vacation with my parents, picking up the odd sea cow rib fragment, which Florida's practically built out of. So many trillions of those things in the ground here. And then that was while I was in college. I went to Tulane University in New Orleans. And then finally went to graduate school in Berkeley, California. And that's when I first had the chance to actually do any original research on fossil sea cows. I was contacted in a roundabout way by some folks in Japan who had found a fossil skeleton in northern Japan in a place called Yamagata. And thought it might be a sea cow, and were writing to various people to find out if that's what it was. And I told them, yeah, it's certainly a sea cow. It looked very interesting. It was the front half of the skeleton, basically, including the head. And expressed an interest in it, and they very generously invited me over to Japan and paid my way over there to help them figure out what it was. Well, it turned out to be one of these forms ancestral to stellar sea cow. It still had teeth, a full set of teeth, although they were smaller and simpler than their earlier ancestors. And they had a flipper, just like Stellar described, except there were some vestigial flipper bones. And the Japanese figured it was between 9 and 10.5 million years old.
Perfect.
So, perfect. So don't ever let anyone tell you that paleontology is not a predictive science, or at least a post-dictive science. And it's not the only time that has happened in my career that we have found just what we expected would be there. If you look in the right place, you find what you expect to find, and sometimes you find things you didn't expect to find. But sometimes the gaps are very neatly filled in with intermediate forms. So don't let the creationists tell you there are no intermediate forms in the fossil record, because there's plenty of them.
So that must be, I'm wondering, how you think about or feel about all the fossils out there that might exist that haven't been discovered. That must be a constant sort of motivator or point of fascination for you.
And now that there are more people on the planet digging more holes in the ground, you find more and more all the time, and paleontologists really can't keep up with them. There's warehouses, literally, warehouses full of collected fossils that are important things, new animals unknown to science, whose fossils have been collected, but there's no money, there's no people to prepare them, so they sit in the warehouse undescribed. They're still in the jackets that they came in the field from, came in from the field and lifetimes of work. You know, I'm thinking of one particular warehouse in Orange County, California, which has been collecting huge jackets full of marine mammals and all kinds of other things from that part of Southern California for decades. And just from salvage operations when that whole county basically was being converted into subdivisions, because I can remember collecting there when I was in graduate school, and it was mostly barren hillsides with very little construction, and now it's all subdivisions. And so very rich fossil beds have been built over, and we will not see them again in our lifetimes or for centuries to come maybe, but a lot of stuff was collected when they were being, those areas were being dug up to build houses on and roads. And like I say, this warehouse is full of this stuff waiting for people to go mine again. And so the best collecting is going to be in these places, right? But yeah, we are really living, certainly for marine mammals, we are living in a golden age of marine mammal paleontology. Throughout my career this has been true, because there have been all sorts of wonderful new animals discovered and are still being discovered and described, like Otobenocetops, this very strange whale with a head that looks like a walrus with tusks coming out of it. Tusk maybe this long, pointing backwards, not forward like a narwhal, but related to a narwhal, but very strange animal. And it's like finding a whole new zoo of unknown animals. It might as well be from another planet. Just think if our zoos today did not have elephants or giraffes or anything, and somebody suddenly showed up with, had just started exploring Africa and came back with a giraffe, and no one had ever seen anything like that before, or an elephant, and no one had ever heard of an elephant before. What an amazing animal, you know, you might as well be a unicorn or something. And that's the way it is in paleontology. We still have a major step to take, which is to see that the root cause of the climate change that people are now finally starting to take seriously is overpopulation, which is still a taboo subject in our society certainly, and in others as well. That it's a sacred cow. You just don't want. You talk about the third rail of politics. It isn't Social Security anymore. But this is something that the politicians certainly don't want to talk about in this country, and not even in a whole lot in other countries. So we have yet to confront the fact of overpopulation as being something that has to be stopped and reversed. We need a drastically smaller population on this planet if we're going to preserve our own life support systems by the end of this century. That was something that was already obvious to most people in the biological sciences, the whole organism, ecologically oriented biology, when I was a graduate student. And then that took me further to see, well, what, if anything, is standing in the way of addressing this population problem. And it was apparent to me, having been raised Catholic, being still a Catholic, that probably the single largest, most influential obstacle towards dealing forthrightly with the population problem is the Roman Catholic Church, I'm sorry to say, the hierarchy, not the church, the hierarchy of the church, and its position on birth control. And so over the years, thinking through that further, it became apparent to me that maybe the most strategic thing we could do is sort of like finding the log in the log jam on the river. If you pull out this log, you can break the log jam maybe. That if we were able to successfully bring about structural organizational reform in the Catholic Church, that policy could be changed. And then, of course, that led me further into thinking about the theology involved, not just the organizational problems, which are really the nub of the problem, but the theology behind it. And then that led on to various other extracurricular activities on my part. That whole thing, from that whole sequence, from working with endangered species to think of the environment in general, the danger to the environment from overpopulation, the obstacle to solving the overpopulation problem being more than any other one factor, the teaching of the Catholic Church needing to be reformed on this issue, and then how do you go about doing that organizationally and theologically. That's one whole train of thought that developed in me over the years. And then in parallel to that, a much shorter but parallel development was, again, starting back in my graduate student days, when the special creationists were becoming very prominent out in California, especially. The whole creation versus evolution argument that goes on today, and seeing the necessity for getting people, Christian believers who had a problem with evolution, to look at it differently, so that they would no longer be the threat that the fundamentalists are to science education in this country and now other countries as well. And then that was an even more direct path to considering the theology of various things, because it really is a theological issue for the people who are the source of the trouble, much more than a problem of scientific data or any lacks in the scientific data. It really is an existential, philosophical, theological issue that is driving this. And so that led me to many years of writing and now teaching on that subject as another sort of extracurricular activity. But both of these trains of thought coincidentally led back to theological thinking and writing and teaching as something that I see as something I can try to contribute to, and maybe do more good that way, of more direct social value and humanitarian value than just studying fossil sea cow bones, which I still enjoy immensely. But these other things I really feel a conscience-driven impetus towards addressing. Follow what is most interesting to you, even if it's not fashionable. When you get up to the college, graduate school level, and you're looking for something to do a thesis on, like that, follow your nose, follow your love, you know, and it really is a matter of love, because when you think about it, you're gonna, if we're now up to the level of graduate school and talking about choice of a dissertation project or something, you're going to be stuck with that project for years of your life. You probably ought to choose it as carefully as you would choose a marriage partner, because you're going to be with them for a long time to come. And so it might as well be something you like doing, not just, and the best kind of mentorship, I think, is not the professor who assigns you some topic to work on. It's better if the student himself or herself comes up with an idea for a project, or whether it's a group of animals to work on, or a subject, or whatever it is, even if it's not what's currently popular. Because if you see that some particular area of study is the big thing, well, by the time it becomes visible as the big thing, you know, the crowd has already gone on ahead of you, and you're eating everybody else's dust. So branch off, do something different from what the crowd is already doing, because you just be following the bandwagon if you go that way, and picking up the scraps left over. Go find something entirely different that nobody seems to be working on, like I did with the sea cows. Nobody was interested in sea cows. There was no work done, being done actively. There was hardly anybody in the world who was actively working on them, one or two people maybe. It was a neglected group of animals. Nobody seemed to know or care much about them, probably didn't think there was much to be found. Sort of like in Egyptian archaeology in the 20s, when everyone thought that the Valley of the Tombs of the Kings in Upper Egypt had been mined out, that everything there had been found. Well, Howard Carter didn't think so, and he poked around for a few years and he discovered the tomb of Tutankhamun, which is the biggest discovery in the history of archaeology, practically. So you never know what you're going to find. I've made an entire career out of this little group of animals that was not being investigated, not much was new there. Everybody thought that, I guess they thought that what there was to find had been found, but there turned out to be an ever-increasing number of things. You start digging around, you look where nobody has looked, you will find what nobody has found. So that's certainly the case in paleontology, but it's a metaphor for science in general. There's so much out there still to be discovered, so go out there and find it, and blaze a new trail rather than following what other people have done. Do as much field work as possible. Spend as much time with the animals if you can. If you're interested in dolphins or seals or spiders or whatever, or earthworms, spend your time hanging out with those critters. Whether it's in your backyard or you have to go a little bit farther to find them, look for opportunities, make opportunities to just be with the creatures and get a first-hand feel for how they live, what they look like, how they behave, dissect them when they're dead, collect their bones, interact with them on as many levels as possible. The population of the planet quadrupled approximately in the 20th century, and it's still going up, and this is a threat to the future of our civilization. That's not an exaggeration to say that. And so the scientists who are the ones in command of the information, who are in contact with the living world, the natural world, and can see the effects of climate change, who can see the effects of habitat destruction by an exploding human population, are the ones in the best position to sound the alarm and to testify to the rest of us, the rest of society, about the dangers we're facing. Like the Bible says, you know, the watchman has the duty to sound the alarm when the danger approaches. And if he sounds the alarm and nobody listens, well, that's the fault of those who are not listening, but the watchman did his duty. But if the watchman is asleep on watch and doesn't sound the alarm, then it's the watchman's fault, and we are the watchmen, scientists especially. We have to testify, if nobody else will, about the dangers. And interestingly enough, it's marine mammal biologists who are in as good a position as anyone, maybe a better position than anyone else in the sciences, to get the attention of people, because the animals we work with are among the most charismatic around. You know, one of the first great landmarks in environmentalism in the 20th century, a turning point, or you might even say one of the key artifacts of the 20th century of the environmental movement, was the Save the Whales bumper sticker.
Yeah,
you know, that
sure.
slogan, Save the Whales, got people's attention because they were impressed by whales. They're charismatic animals. And here in Florida, it's manatees almost as much as the whales, now that people have gotten acquainted with them. And now people all over the world think of manatees practically in the same category as pandas. You know, they're lovable animals. And the thought that they are in danger of extinction gets people upset and gets people motivated to do something. And so the animals that we study as marine mammalogists on the one hand, and the things that have happened to those marine mammals demonstrate the dangers.